Okay.
All right. Well, hello everyone. Welcome back. I'm Corey Huffman with Cato and Cato, and as chapter president for ACG Austin and San Antonio. Like I said, I just want to welcome everyone back. It's been a while. It's really great to see some smiling faces, familiar faces on here, and I get it. I know that our program it's probably not going to be quite the same without some rubber chicken and some oversteamed broccoli. But we're working hard to change that. I know a lot of you have asked, when we're going to be meeting again in person, and to let you know, we're pushing really hard to have our first in-person event in July. So more to come. Keep your eyes peeled for some exciting events coming your way. And speaking of exciting events, y'all, we have a home run hitter with us today. We are thrilled to have Morris Miller, who's CEO of Xenex Disinfection Services and managing partner at Tectonic Ventures. And maybe just before I share a little bit more, just to touch on a couple quick things, I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment just to thank our annual sponsors. So really like to thank the folks at Weaver, Insperity, Dykema, and Higher Better. We couldn't do things without you. So very much appreciate your sponsorship. And also one other note, plan on sticking around afterwards. We're going to be doing some networking. Know that that's one of the biggest things that we get out of being members of ACG. We're able to break into smaller groups. So definitely check it out, and you never know, just might be able to get a deal done. So with that, let me introduce Morris a little bit. I feel like he doesn't need an introduction. He's a great friend of ACG. He's spoken several times at our events, but the neat thing is each time we hear from him, he leaves us with something new. And you can read about Morris's full accomplishments in his bio on our website. And just to give you a few quick snippets, he was a co-founder of Rackspace, which sold for $4.3 billion. He founded Curtis Hill Publishing, which later was sold to Thompson Legal Publishing. He's even created a custom golf ball company called golfballs.com. So check it out. More that I could share, but I guess we'll just let Morris do that. So with that, Morris, it's all yours.
Great. Thank you very much. Good to see so many friends here. My friend AJ is on here. If y'all don't know Brock Coleman, Brock runs Commercial Kitchen. He literally just saved a local restaurant that was having a huge problem for years. They've had a problem for 3 years with their oven, and Brock sent in one of his top techs, and literally in 10 minutes, the problem, this vexing problem, was solved. And then, of course, my wife, Michelle Miller, is on the call as well. So welcome, Michelle. I have a slide deck. If you want to enable screen sharing, that would be great.
Sure.
Corey and Sarah, thank you all for having me. There we go, screen sharing. So let me just start with a video, which we had never really had before as a company. I'll play the video and then we'll jump into the deck and update you on what's happening with Xenex.
In a world of constantly evolving pathogens, you can't leave disinfection to chance. You can't fight what you can't see, but you can strike it. Introducing the Xenex LightStrike robot. It does just one thing. Deactivates deadly pathogens fast. Its germ-zapping broad-spectrum UV has made it the most widely adopted disinfection robot ever created. Why use a LightStrike robot to disinfect? Simple. Manual cleaning leaves as much as 60% of surfaces not disinfected. You can't kill the germs you miss, but this can. You see, the Johns Hopkins doctors that created LightStrike knew that a true and comprehensive UV solution does more than just strike down pathogens. It gives doctors, nurses, and patients hope in a constant battle against germs and the certainty to focus on what's most important. In fact, the LightStrike disinfects a room somewhere in the world every 4.7 seconds. Leading hospitals have chosen Xenex and published over 40 peer-reviewed studies proving that the LightStrike's patented UV can disinfect what you can't see. That's why the best hotels, stadiums, transportation hubs, and schools all trust the power of LightStrike to help them destroy the worst pathogens we know of today and the ones we'll find tomorrow. When you can't leave disinfection to chance, call in LightStrike, because what you can't see isn't gone until you strike it.
So I think that gives you an idea of what says, as we go. Let me stop sharing, and then I'm going to share a different screen for you. So that'll give you an idea of where we've gone over the last really year. So expanding out of that original focus on hospitals and going to other markets. I guess you have your video cut off, but I wouldn't if I was in front of you. And I thought it was very good judgment on Corey's part to say that this would be the last meeting that was not in person, and they would have me at that. And then next month, y'all would actually be in person with the speaker. So that was good judgment. But when you think about other pathogens that have come, y'all might remember Ebola and the Ebola crisis, and that was only in 2014. So that seems like a long time ago. That was 7 years ago. We had avian flu, Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome, MERS, and then some people don't even realize what SARS-CoV-2 stands for. You know, SARS-CoV-1 was a vexing pathogen, sudden acute respiratory syndrome. This is the second time it's happened. So anybody that thinks like, okay, well now we're set for a long time, I would beg to differ, because the likelihood of something like this happening again is highly predictable. And we now have a breather time where we can prepare for the next time, because in a connected world, and I think the air traffic for July is supposed to be equal to what it was pre-pandemic. Everybody's traveling again. They're going to be traveling internationally. And this idea of cross-border transfer of pathogens is going to continue to see happen. All right. So for those of you who haven't been with me before, and I think this is my third time with you, the company was founded by Julie Stachowiak on the left and Dr. Mark Stibic on the right. Both of them earned their PhDs in epidemiology from Johns Hopkins. Since the last time I presented, I think we were in about 350 facilities. Now we're in 800 plus facilities. And depending upon which time you look at the video said 4.7 seconds. This is a little bit later slide, 5.1 seconds. Can y'all hear me clearly? Yep. Okay, somebody's mic. But clearly, these are being used in these 800 facilities around the world. And when I say around the world, Japan has a huge numbers of these robots, Italy, Spain, Canada. I think we're in 37 countries around the world. So the Middle East has a lot too. The mission has changed slightly since the last time I talked to you. We used to say that we wanted to prevent the pain and suffering caused by these deadly pathogens. We've really focused on our partners, because when you think about people in Italy or Japan, we're enabling our partners to save lives and reduce suffering by destroying these deadly microorganisms that cause infection. So that's a little bit of a change in terms of working through them. And that can be both our international partners as well as the hospitals domestically and internationally. One of the things that I've talked to y'all about, and there's been more research published on this, there may be a question of like, well, why doesn't traditional cleaning work? And the answer is, when they've done the studies, and if I hold up a piece of paper here, if I start moving a disinfectant around this piece of paper, number one, it'll be a little bit annoying for you to watch it. But number two, it literally, most of the chemicals that are being used in hospitals have between a 90-second and a 9-minute dwell time on the surface. So literally, if you think about how much time I've been speaking so far to you, we're not even through a third of the dwell time. And when you think about bed rails and all of the hospital room that needs to be disinfected, the housekeepers in a 28 to 45 minute period of time, they don't have enough time to let the chemicals do what needs to be done. And during the pandemic, you saw the rise of electrostatic sprayers. Electrostatic sprayers do a better job of putting an even coating of chemicals, but they don't change the dwell time. And furthermore, when you think about surfaces, they're not spraying paper with chemicals. You don't want them to spray your computer, your keyboard, and other electronics because it will ruin them. And therefore, the number of places that they can get aren't all of the high touch surfaces, and it doesn't change that dwell time. So 53% of the surfaces after manual housekeeping, and this would apply to electrostatic spraying also, they are still pathogenic. They still have pathogens on them that can make people get sick. And the colony counts, it's a technical term, but all that is to say is that there's enough pathogens on the surface that they will make you sick. And the way that that happens is you touch your desk or something like that, and then you rub your eye, or you might rub your nose, anything like that, or you might take a piece of food in your mouth. That's how people are getting these pathogens. It happens all the time in hospitals. That's why LightStrike has been effective in those environments. So 2 to 9 minutes. The other thing that we've discovered, electrostatic spraying is like what's happening in the upper right-hand corner picture. And the other thing is, you saw our robot in that video. All of the other robots look like these robots on the left. So they all have these long bulbs. That's a mercury UV lamp. And if you think it looks a lot like a fluorescent lamp in the school ceiling when you were growing up, that's because it is. If you were to take a fluorescent light bulb and change the glass case to quartz and then put a little bit of mercury amalgam on the inside of it, you have a mercury lamp that will put out UV light. When they've tested that in CDC funded studies, they ran the mercury light bulb devices for 52 minutes and they still didn't manage to bring down the infection rates. Okay, so sort of the right idea. It's just that technology has not proven to work. Hospitals are still buying it because the companies are allowed to say what they want to say, but from a statistical basis, from a publishing perspective, they haven't won. The difference that intensity makes, and this is where I'm going to talk about Xenex. If you look at this, this is a picture of a block of steel that's about a ½ inch thick, and I'll hold it up in front of you, right? So that's what it looks like in front of my face. So the same thing, so you know that this is a real block of steel. If I was to take a sink and let water drip on this, I could let sink water at 15 pounds per square inch, or even a good flow of water drip on it for the next 100 years, and it's not going to do anything to this block, okay? But when you hit it with that same thing, water, and you do it at 60,000 pounds per square inch, all of a sudden it will literally carve through this like it's butter, okay? And that's what's happening with a LightStrike robot. And intrinsically, you know this, because any of you that have ever gone outside on an intense sun day, like we've had over the last few weeks, if you don't put on sunscreen, you're going to get sunburned. And that's the ultraviolet rays from the sun damaging the DNA of your skin, okay? We're doing the same thing on a microscopic level to those pathogens. So some of you all have seen this slide before. On A and B, that's the control. Above is Listeria monocytogenes, below is E. coli. In the center is the old way of making UV light using those mercury lamps. And even after 10 minutes, there really isn't damage to those pathogens. And then on the right in E and F is again Listeria on top and E. coli. And you can see intensity has completely blown a hole in the side of the protein shell of the pathogen. You can't see that on the surface, but I can guarantee you if that represents the surface in a hospital room, there's pathogens all over the place. We're destroying them so that they can't replicate. If they can't replicate, then even if you happen to rub your eye or a nurse touches it and then touches a catheter that they're putting into your arm, you're going to be okay. Okay. A very bright reporter once asked me, I showed her the slide, Ms. Liz McLaughlin, and she said, okay, I get it. I see what you're saying. She goes, will the mercury devices ever lyse the cells? And the answer is no, they will not lyse the cells. And she says, and does pulsed xenon lyse the cells every time? And I said, it doesn't lyse them every time, but it does it the majority of the time. And she's like, okay, I understand the difference. And so hopefully y'all can leave today going like, there is a big difference. The middle row would be like going outside on a very cloudy day, like when it's raining, and you can be outside all day long, no sunburn. Xenex Pulse Xenon is going out like on the most intense sun day that you've ever seen. When SARS-CoV-2 came out, we knew about Ebola, we knew about SARS, the original pathogen, and we immediately called Texas Biomedical Research Institute. I don't know if y'all have met Larry Schlesinger, but if you haven't, very bright guy, knows more about tuberculosis and other infectious diseases than almost anybody in the world. And he's here, and I called Larry and said, could you get SARS-CoV-2? And he says, I don't know why we couldn't. He says, it'll probably take us a couple weeks. And I said, and then to grow it, he said, it would probably take us 3 or 4 weeks to grow it because it's very hard to grow viruses on media. And then I said, okay, and if we wanted to give you a robot to disinfect it, he said, you know, we don't know how quickly SARS-CoV-2 is going to spread. He's like, so we would be willing to get it. We're willing to grow it. And we're willing to run an experiment where your robot tries to kill it. He's like, but I'm not going to give you your robot back for over a year. And I said, that's fine. So we delivered the robot. They got SARS-CoV-2. It took them about 6 weeks to prepare for the test. And basically, we were able to kill 99.99% of it in less than a minute. And we were able to announce that worldwide. So we were the first company in the world to show actual efficacy against the real SARS-CoV-2 versus, you know, sometimes people will say, well, this is very similar to it, so it's a surrogate for it. We wanted the real thing, and we were able to do that. So interestingly, I think there was 2 firsts for San Antonio. One was what Texas Biomedical Research was able to do in terms of getting it, growing it, and then 2 in terms of us being able to kill it. And then I've shared with you all before, you know, the big problem in hospitals, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, is C. diff, clostridiosis. They've changed the name. It used to be Clostridium difficile. Now it's Clostridiosis difficile. The robots that we create run in the hospitals on 5 minutes on each side of a hospital bed. And again, using the notepad as the prop here, the reason we want to run on both sides, if this is a remote control sitting on that bed or on a tray table, if we run the robot over here, we've done a good job of disinfecting everything here and the top of the remote, but you really need to move the remote and turn it over and then get it on the other side. That's why we always run for a minimum of 2 cycles in a room, 5 minutes on each side. And it's 5 minutes because we're going after C. diff. If there was a world without C. diff, we would have a 2-minute cycle and basically do an amazing job of disinfecting these rooms. 2 minutes on the right side, 2 minutes on the left side. Frequent question then is, well, what are the housekeepers doing? Like, are the housekeepers even necessary? And the answer is, yes, they are. If you didn't get rid of the visible dirt, the blood and other proteinaceous materials, mucus and other things on the surfaces, the hospital room would look filthy and you wouldn't go in it. Now, the advantage of that would be, you'd be like, okay, it looks filthy because it is filthy. When they wipe it down, they're actually making it look good. They're using the Xenex robots to do the actual disinfection. So we separate cleaning from disinfection. And I think 10 years from now, that will be the norm across the world, where they're going to say, okay, yeah, the housekeepers come in and they do a phenomenal job of making that room look clean. And then you bring in a LightStrike robot and actually make it clean. I think the last time I presented to you, we were at about 9 million rooms that have cycles that have been run to disinfect hospital rooms. We're now at 28 million cycles, and there's thousands of robots that are out there. I'll talk about the upper tier of hospitals, and literally it's interesting to me that if you think about these hospitals, Mayo Clinic, I'm not saying that Mayo Clinic has them in their Rochester, Minnesota hospital. Mayo Clinic has them in every single one of their hospitals. They've mandated it for all of their affiliates. They are committed. They have a sole source contract. They tried other types of UV. It didn't work. Xenex did. And if you were to log on to the government website that tracks hospitals' infections, which is called Hospital Compare. So if you're ever going to a hospital, most people don't know this, you can go Hospital Compare and say, well, how is Methodist doing versus Baptist versus Christus? And all of those numbers for all of the pathogens related to what you might get in a hospital are posted there. And to remind people of the numbers, about 1 million people a year in the United States, sometimes as many as 2 million, get infections when they go to the hospital, and about 100,000 of them die. So somewhere between 5 and 10% of the people who get a hospital infection die from it. So Mayo Clinic has it. MD Anderson did our original, that's where we did the original proof work. They've been using it since 2010, so 11 years. Stanford has bought and bought and bought. St. Joseph's, Beth Israel, and Boston, Northwell, which is the major hospital system in the New York area. Ochsner on the right side is interesting. Ochsner is a large hospital in New Orleans, and they actually couldn't afford robots. And we said, look, we know we can deliver the results that you want. And they said, are you willing to put your money where your mouth is? And we said, sure. So we deployed half the robots that they needed. They had an 800-bed facility. We deployed 8 robots. They needed 16. We disinfected half the hospital. The infection rates plummeted 48%. And on the untreated half of the hospital, they were up 7 to 27%. We then deployed across the entire hospital, and their overall infection rates dropped 72%. And the last time I saw the numbers, they were at a 78% sustained reduction. I also believe that during the pandemic, they didn't lose any healthcare workers as a result of SARS-CoV-2. We're not claiming responsibility for that. They've got a lot of great processes there, but it's an interesting fact. Then down below is all of the government hospitals. The government has done an amazing job of adopting robots. We're in about 120 now VA hospitals and Department of Defense facilities. And robots have recently started being used in police departments. It started with the LAPD, where some of the officers were contracting MRSA, methicillin-resistant staph, from the inmates, where it was running rampant in their population. They used the LightStrike robots to eliminate it from the surfaces. And remember, they're using handcuffs and other things that can become infected or become pathogenic. They become pathogenic, and then they can pass the infection. San Antonio has bought them for the San Antonio Police Department too. In other areas during the pandemic, we had inquiries from Weston, is where it started. And then we got the Waldorf Astoria, Beverly Hills Hilton, Paramount Miami World Center, which is a huge luxury high-rise in Miami. Then we started getting calls from airports that are trying to disinfect large areas. Jesus, who runs the San Antonio airport, adopted it, and their usage is off the charts. They've done a great job. Carolina Panthers wanted to use this to protect patients. They called about a dozen hospitals in the Carolinas, and all of them used Xenex in their hospitals. And that was really all of the inquiry that the Panthers needed to do. And after the Panthers announced, then R.C. Buford called me and said, the Spurs, I saw the announcement, we'd like to use that for the Spurs. And then finally, on the right side, we've been doing this for school districts around the country. And when you think about Texas schools getting compensated by having children stay in schools, this is a good way to disinfect the environment. We've all seen instances where a child comes down with a cough or a cold, and the next thing you know, everybody in the class has it. By using LightStrike robots, they can stop that. And to that point, we have a bunch of hospitals in Oklahoma. And when norovirus hit those hospitals about 2 years ago, they called us and they said, hey, can you help us? And we said, yep, let us know what you want. We overnighted a dozen robots to them at no charge. They volunteered the labor. They disinfected the junior schools and the high schools and literally stopped the norovirus outbreak within 3 days. So it wasn't running rampant. And we know that that can happen in schools here as well. So that's really the update. Company was about 6 times faster growth rate. And when you think about that, let me stop my screen sharing here. It did, okay. So when you think about that, the idea of scaling a supply chain from producing a couple hundred robots to producing 1,000 robots, that is a huge hurdle. And I'll just say that the team here did an amazing job in a restricted supply chain year to enable us to deliver those robots literally as fast as hospitals, both domestically and internationally, wanted them. And they've just continued to do that. We also moved to a new facility. We were in a office center where we had 3 different pods of employees. So we had like 15,000 in one place and 20,000 in another place. And we combined all of that and moved literally across the highway. So we're now on Arion Parkway. And it's been great this year to have everybody together. We get to see everybody every day. And that really makes a great difference in terms of collegiality, spirit, and just it's just nice to see everybody. So with that, I will stop. We're still excited to be here in San Antonio. This has been a great place to operate. The mayor, Tommy Calvert, Judge Nelson Wolf, were all really supportive during the pandemic to make sure that we had everything we need. And quite frankly, we never stopped coming into the office. So we came in throughout the entire pandemic. We had all of the builders here. I was here. The leadership team was here. The only people that we let work from home were the customer service people who were interacting with people around the country over the phone or via Zoom anyway. So with that, I'll turn it over. If y'all have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And Sarah and Corey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Morris. So let's open it up. Any questions for Morris?
AJ, no insider questions there.
Morris, this is Roy Graham. Appreciate your coming back a third time. Excuse me. I recall your first presentation, and you know, as I recall at that time, breaking into the healthcare bureaucracy was a real challenge, and you've obviously not only done that, but really got a marquee list of clients now. So my question, if I were to get ill and need surgery, what hospital in San Antonio would I want to go to?
I would go to University Health Systems.
I take it they are a user?
They are a user. They've been a user. Here in San Antonio, their Baptist is using this in one of their joint replacement centers. The Audie Murphy VA has done a great job of both adopting and readopting. And then BAMC had robots. They switched to the Mercury product, and then they immediately came right back. And so it turns out that the nonprofit hospitals here in San Antonio, UHS, Audie Murphy VA, and BAMC are the places that, if you're asking me where I would go, that's where I would go.
Great, appreciate that. One final question, and I'll let some others jump in. What are the plans going forward in the future? Are there other products that you're entertaining, or do you have any plans to, you know, eventually do an IPO, or can you just speak in general to what your future plans are?
Sure. So I didn't mention it. We did. I don't have one with me. We did come out with a handheld product that we call Deactivate. And if you think about I'll go back to my demonstration piece here. If you think about like a UV light handheld that you might see in an airline magazine, literally now, if this is just a piece of paper about the size of a magazine, and I wanted to disinfect it with one of those lights, I'd have to put it here, and it would take me about 90 seconds from about 4 to 5 inches away to disinfect this piece of paper. Okay, that is not something that is usable in anybody's real life. So we came out with this Deactivate handheld. It's about this big, it weighs about 4 pounds, and basically it will disinfect a 0.8 meters, so 3/4 of a meter from 1 meter away in 30 seconds. So that's something that in our use case, we had a lot of airlines that were saying, look, we really want to disinfect the flight deck. We can't have anything that's going to turn our instrumentation yellow, which the mercury lamps turn everything yellow. So we came up with this form of a disinfection. You hold it in your hand, imagine bringing it into the flight deck, 30 seconds on the left, 30 seconds on the right. Now all of the controls that pilot is going to touch have been disinfected. They can feel really good about it. There's no residue, there's no chemical spray. I mean, it's a very elegant solution. And we think about it where the LightStrike robot is really for your rooms, and the Deactivate handheld is for your personal spaces. So a Uber driver could have this in their car to disinfect between clients. Or a rental car company might say, look, I don't want to have a robot to disinfect the cars, but I do want to have a handheld device so I'm not destroying the surfaces, I'm not spraying chemicals everywhere, and literally I'm going to do 30 seconds on each side, and now the front is disinfected, 30 seconds in the back, now that car is actually disinfected and it's good to go. So that's what's done it, how it's being used. A number of hotels have bought those and they're using them to disinfect luggage for guests. So you've ever wondered, like you have these, bags that are being pulled all over the place, they disinfect the luggage carts, then they disinfect your luggage, then they bring it to your room, they put it on a stand, and it actually makes for a much better and less pathogenic guest experience.
Morris, we've had a couple questions come in through the chat box here too. So one question is, can you share how many robots you'd deployed or sold before the pandemic and how many you feel like are out there now?
We don't actually disclose that, but when I say thousands now, that is a plural term and that's accurate. So there's thousands before, there were not thousands before, and there are thousands now. So it was a huge, huge growth in the company. And when we look at the overall market, the world needs about 130 to 145,000 of these LightStrike robots. So even with thousands out there, I look at it and I go, we're just scratching the surface of where we need to get to. And, 29 million cycles is great. And, you can give yourself a pat on the back, I suppose, except for the fact that any room that's not being disinfected is a room where it's much more likely that the patient is going to get an infection. And if you think the infection rates are bad here, all you need to do is go to places like Canada, the UK, even Israel, which has a phenomenal hospital system, has about twice the hospital infection rate, nosocomial infection rate that we have here in the United States. So there's a huge opportunity to continue to do this work. And, one of the nice things about being involved in healthcare is not only do you get to grow a company that you're proud of from an economic standpoint, but you actually get to do good for the community. And Michelle hears me talk about what we're doing on a community basis all the time. And even during the pandemic, everybody in the company agreed, even when our cost of goods sold rose, so for example, we had airplane clips. And when the pandemic hit, all of the airlines thought, oh, there might be a supply chain issue. And they bought all of these airplane clips. Now, the reason we used airplane clips is because we don't ever want our robots to break. So airplane clips end up being very high quality. They're made to not break. So we were literally on the phone all the time with airlines and airline supply companies saying, can you please release some of your clips that you're not going to use because air travel has dramatically dropped. We understand why you did it, and we want your help as part of this life-saving measure. And when we would show them, we now have 46 peer-reviewed published studies. When we'd show them the studies, they'd be like, wow, okay, we're here, we want to help. And they would share their clips with us, they'd sell their clips to us. But even as the price of all of those goods increased, we never changed our pricing. And internationally, we enabled international buyers like Italy to buy robots at a lower price, knowing that then they could make up the differential later when they put them into full-time permanent service.
Now, so Morris, you mentioned that you have a good amount of your clients, your customers that are outright purchasing these. Is there an option to lease or rent, or do you lend some out in certain cases? What does that look like?
Yep, we've done a lot of charitable lending. There's a group here that they basically rehabilitate medical goods, and they needed robots, and we said we'll make them available. We have a robot as a service called Strike Force, and we've done a lot of schools. We've done nursing homes just because they've asked us to. And then for the hospitals or nursing homes, long-term acute care facilities, we've always been willing to lease whatever they need. We will figure out the economics to enable them to have the solution to protect their people, period. End of story, including with Ochsner, where they just couldn't buy them. And we said, look, we'll put them in at our cost, and then we'll only bill you as your patients don't get infections. So the money that you would have spent on the infections, you'll use that to basically pay a lease on the robots. And that really enabled them. And they only had to pay after it proved successful. And we've been willing to do that at any hospital anywhere.
Man, that's amazing. Just two quick questions in the comments here. So the folks are asking, as far as on the Austin side of things, hospital-wise, any recommendations there? If you're sick, what system you'd recommend?
David, who's the CEO of St. David's South Austin, they had purchased robots.
Okay.
They had great success with them. So St. David's South Austin, under David's watch, was doing a great job. I haven't gotten a report on them lately. So if I didn't know any better, I'd go to St. David's South Austin. No, I don't know anywhere else.
No, that's great. And then probably a little more technical side of things. Question about, is disinfection line of sight? Any concern with objects that aren't directly hit by light? I think maybe you touched on that with the remote example, but
right. You need to have the robots on both sides of the bed, so you're always getting direct light on the object that you want to do it, and you need to get both sides of the objects. That's why we train the housekeepers, because these are always run by housekeepers or nurses, to flip everything in the room, flip the remote control, the nurse's call button, the mattress, and everything in there. And that's why you really need two locations for the light to hit those objects. The other thing that's not necessarily intuitive unless you've been in this is, if you think about it, you're likely to touch the bed rails, the mattress, maybe your headboard. You're really not likely to touch underneath the bed. You're not likely to touch behind the headboard or anything like that. So the non-high touch surfaces, we don't worry about. And it's turned out they aren't problematic. So the ceiling, do we do as good a job of disinfecting the ceiling? Probably not. But it's not, people aren't Spider-Man. They're not crawling on the ceilings, and therefore it doesn't really matter as much. I see one other, somebody asked, does exposure to the UV light have any side effects? On the Pulse Xenon, it does not have any side effects on the surfaces. The old way of doing it does. And the person is not in the room when the robot runs. So there's sensors on the robot. If it sees motion, if it sees heat, it instantly stops. And at 29 million cycles without any adverse consequences, I would say the sensors are working pretty well to prevent people from being exposed. And the other thing that most people don't realize, that even if you have a piece of saran wrap, so it's I think it's 1 micron thick, is able to block the UV light from coming through. So if you're looking from a window into a room that's being disinfected, that UV light will not come through the glass. That's a lot thicker than saran wrap, and that'll prevent it from doing it. And then somebody asked, how long do the bulbs last? And a single bulb will probably work on somewhere between 700 and 1,000 rooms. And we're monitoring the robots remotely. They automatically upload all of the information. Have y'all heard about Internet of Things, IoT, right? Like, this is really an IoT device, because it's constantly giving us feedback when a cycle is completed successfully. It hits the portal and it uploads cycle complete, or it'll tell us one more position needs to be done. We don't try to act like Big Brother, but we could. So imagine if Corey was the head of running a hospital, we could tell Corey, hey, somebody did 2 positions in the room. and they didn't do the third position, and Corey could call them and say, hey, you missed a position. Now, we don't try to be intrusive like that, but the technology is there on the robots and in the portal to enable that kind of interactivity. But we're finding that the housekeepers, the nurses are doing a phenomenal job of running them once they understand them.
Hey, Morris, Larry Anthus here.
Hey, Larry.
Great presentation, as usual. I love your props as well. I hope I have some of those props in my office as well to demonstrate the thing. But I absolutely, you know, I think you've got business owners that beg for business growth, but be careful what you ask for. Any advice for growing your business sixfold in 2 months, or how that worked last year? I mean, you made it sound as a matter of fact, but last year for you was got to be one of the most incredible years, you know, for this business and what happened during the pandemic. Can you kind of, from a 30,000 foot level, talk about what you think you had to do at that point to get the robots out?
So early in the pandemic, you know, when you have to scale production, the first thing that I think about as CEO is, do we have enough cash to buy the part to scale it? Then you got to hire people to do it. You got to make sure you have space. And so we were literally doing all three of those things. One of the changes that we made is we enabled the international partners to purchase robots less expensively up front, but we asked them to pay up front, and they did. And so quickly we were able to resolve our capital issue. And then it was a matter of getting the parts in, and things that usually had a 2-week lead time or maybe a week lead time, all of a sudden there was a 1-month lead time. And we talked to a number of people at the Manufacturers Association in San Antonio, and everybody pulled together. The Toyota plant people came over to help us set up even more efficient assembly. Somebody's not on mute. Anyway, but little by little, we were able to sort of knock down each of the issues. And Michelle will tell you, we were at the office nonstop. So we'd get here at 7 and we would leave at 10:30 at night. And all day long, we're just trying to solve one problem at a time. And frequently, you know, I told you about the the airplane clips. You know, we have lift rails that allow the head of the robot to go up and down. And my supply chain people were like, I can't get lift rails. And we literally got the CEO of the lift rail company on the phone. And when you think about just normal communication between people, I'm telling him that we need lift rails. And finally, he says, look, you know, you have every lift rail we can make. And I said, are there any restrictions on, you know, other lift rails that might substitute? And he goes, what do you mean? I go, I don't know. Like, you know, ours are silver. Do you have any that are black? And he goes, well, yeah, I've got black ones in stock. And I go, okay, it doesn't, this is inside the robot. Nobody will ever see the color. We bought the plain, you know, silver ones because you didn't have to paint them. But if they're painted, I don't care. And he's like, oh, okay, well, we can ship those to you tomorrow. You can have them in 4 days. So there was like constant surprises like that, where just by pushing on people a little bit and asking one more question, they could actually solve the problem for you. And they wanted to. They just, you know, when the order says, I need a 32-inch silver lift rail with this size, you know, threading on it, they think, okay, that's the spec. And they're not necessarily going to think. So good question, Larry. And the answer is, you know, you have to work with people and allow them to sort of dream about what other options they can come up with to help you solve your problem. And in a crisis, especially, people are really, you know, I was constantly amazed. Americans, this is the greatest country on earth for a reason, because when there's a emergency, people will pull together to try to solve the problem. Even if it doesn't help them personally, they will try to help you solve the problem. And it's just one more thing to love about the country. And that's not something that's legislated. That's just part of our ethos. It's part of who we are as human beings and Americans.
It's a great story. Great story. Do you think things have stabilized? I mean, what does the stabilized business look like at this point? Do we know?
From a business perspective, it's stable. We're still seeing a lot of problems in the supply chain. You know, the United States has become very dependent on China to produce resistors and transistors and other, you know, very fine electronic parts. Now, part of that is because China has a lot of the world's rare earth materials, and a lot of those are needed to create a lot of these electronic items. But, you know, y'all may not know it. There's another company here in San Antonio called Blue Line Corporation, and Blue Line, under John Blumenthal's watch, he's one of the world's experts at extracting rare earths that have already been built into products and making them so you can reuse them in other products. So it's kind of like recycling, but it's at a completely higher level. So if somebody said, you know, I've always said, San Antonio, the mayor would ask me, well, what do we need? And I'd say, you need a direct flight to Boston. Well, we're going to have that in October from JetBlue. As a country, we need to reinvest in a lot of the micro supply chain items so that we're not dependent outside of the United States. And this isn't anything like nationalism or anti another country, but if you don't have the supply chain there, we're experiencing the delays because, you know, China is picking and choosing who can get resistors, transistors, and other things. And we don't want to be at any other countries, not just anti-China or anything like that. You don't want to be at anybody else's mercy.
Great question.
Thank you.
So I think we have one last question. And I guess I would just kind of categorize this as, you know, Xenex still feels like a really well-kept secret to many of us. What can we do locally here to best support you and help out?
So first of all, I hate to hear that it's a secret. That's a personal failure. So that means I'm not talking enough and we're not explaining it enough. I mean, basically, at some point in time, the way that things change is because patients say, if you're not disinfecting my room that way, I'm not going to go to your facility. You vote with your feet. And it's like, I'm not anti any hospital here per se. It's like, that's not a good thing to do, but you vote with your feet. And you insist and you call your doctor and you say, look, I need to be admitted to the hospital and I need a surgery. I really want my operating room disinfected with a LightStrike robot. And when they go, you know, we do a great job of disinfecting things. This is our job. You need to look them in the eye and you need to say, with all due respect, the evidence indicates otherwise. And I'm happy to get on the phone with them. Y'all can write down my number, 210-273-6768. That's 210-273-6768. I am willing to get up. I get up at 4 in the morning. So anybody you want me to talk to, anybody you want me to meet with, I will do it. I will have a team meet with them. We will explain the science. I expect them to look at the studies. You know, we have not paid, even to this date, we haven't paid for a single study. So 45 plus studies, no payments, no conflicts. It's like the science tells the story. It's a science-founded company by Mark and Julie, and we've stayed true to that mission. And hopefully that evidence will eventually persuade the entire market.
And Morris, what I'll add too is I don't think there's any failure in that. I think you got a lot of ground to cover, and you know, maybe even by recording this, you know, helping just to get the word out. And I think you're right. Just by us demanding, you know, more of care providers and helping to vote with our feet, I think it's a great thing for us to consider. So
good, great to see you. Thank you, Corey, Sarah, appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, Morris, again, I just want to say thank you on a couple different levels. Thank you for your time today. But you mentioned it, you know, in really trying times, we see a lot of business owners and just Americans band together and find ways to help out. And we saw a lot of companies come together from like a PPE perspective or helping with supply chains and things like that. But what you've done, I think we can all agree, is a completely different level. I mean, you and your company have made a significant difference globally. There's not many people that can say that. And you've got a great heart, and you know, we owe a debt of gratitude to you. So thank you so much for your robots, your technology, and just keeping at it. We greatly appreciate it.
If you see my team members, thank the employees, because they're.
We will, for sure.
Okay.